"You thief! How dare you take my dog?" The words pierced through the air like a sharp dagger, accompanied by a frenzied Karen storming towards me, her face contorted with rage. I stood there, bewildered, as she pointed an accusatory finger in my direction, her eyes blazing with fury. It all started earlier that morning when I had let my beloved golden retriever, Buddy, out into the backyard for his daily romp. I had stepped away for a moment to grab his leash, fully expecting to return and find him happily chasing squirrels or lounging in the sun. But when I came back, Buddy was nowhere to be seen, and the gate was ajar. Panic set in as I frantically searched the neighborhood, calling out Buddy's name. Just as I was about to give up hope, I spotted a familiar figure in the distance. Karen, the neighborhood's self-proclaimed dog expert and eternal busybody. And in her arms, struggling to free himself, was my beloved Buddy. "What's going on here?" I demanded, my heart racing. "I saw your dog running loose and decided to take him back to his rightful owner," Karen declared smugly, clutching Buddy tightly. "But that's my dog," I protested, reaching out to take Buddy from her. "Liar," she spat, backing away. "This is my dog, and you're trying to steal him. I should call the police on you." I was stunned, unable to comprehend the audacity of her claims. Buddy was my constant companion, my loyal friend, and I would never dream of taking him from his home. As I opened my mouth to plead my case, Karen cut me off. "I saw you take him from your yard and try to run off with him. You think you can just steal other people's pets and get away with it." She was practically foaming at the mouth, her chest heaving with each accusatory statement. I tried to reason with her, to explain that Buddy was indeed my dog and that I had no intention of stealing him. But Karen was having none of it. She insisted that I was the thief and that she was merely trying to return the stolen animal to its rightful owner. Frustrated and unable to get through to her, I decided to call the police, hoping they could sort out this absurd situation. As I waited for the authorities to arrive, Karen continued her tirade, drawing the attention of the entire neighborhood. Little did she know that the security cameras installed in my yard had captured the entire incident, and the truth would soon be revealed. The police arrived within minutes, their sirens blaring, and I quickly ushered them to the security cameras mounted on the side of my house. As I replayed the footage, Karen's face turned ashen, her eyes widening with realization. The video showed Buddy happily playing in the backyard, oblivious to the impending drama. Suddenly, Karen appeared at the gate, her gaze darting around furtively before reaching down and scooping up the unsuspecting dog. She then turned and briskly walked away, clutching Buddy tightly despite his desperate attempts to free himself. The officers watched the footage in stunned silence, their expressions shifting from confusion to disbelief. Finally, one of them turned to Karen, his voice stern. "Ma'am, it appears you have been the one who took this man's dog, not the other way around. Do you have any explanation for this?" Karen's face flushed with embarrassment, and she opened and closed her mouth several times, struggling to find the right words. I saw the dog running loose, and I was just trying to help," she stammered, her voice wavering. "Help," I interjected, unable to contain my anger. "You practically kidnapped my dog. How is that helping?" The officer raised his hand, silencing me. "Ma'am, the evidence is quite clear. You will need to return the dog to its rightful owner immediately." Karen's shoulders slumped in defeat, and she reluctantly handed Buddy over to me. As I cuddled my beloved pet, relieved to have him back safe and sound, I couldn't help but feel a twinge of pity for Karen. Her actions, while misguided and misinformed, had clearly stemmed from a place of misplaced concern. However, my sympathy quickly dissipated when Karen launched into another tirade, this time directed at the officers. "This is outrageous. I was just trying to help, and now you're accusing me of theft. Do you have any idea who I am? I'm the president of the Neighborhood Pet Welfare Association, and I know more about dogs than any of you." The officers exchanged a weary glance, clearly unimpressed by Karen's claims of authority. One of them stepped forward, his voice calm but firm. "Ma'am, that doesn't give you the right to take someone else's property, regardless of your perceived expertise. You will need to come with us to the station to file a report and discuss the appropriate consequences for your actions." As Karen was led away, her shrill protests echoing through the neighborhood, I couldn't help but feel a sense of satisfaction. While the situation was far from ideal, I was relieved to have my beloved buddy back and to see that justice had prevailed, at least for now. The aftermath of the incident with Karen left me feeling shaken and unsettled. While I was relieved to have Buddy back safe and sound, the whole ordeal had been a jarring and unpleasant experience. As the police escorted the disgruntled Karen to the station, I couldn't help but wonder what would happen next. Would she face any serious consequences for her actions, or would she somehow find a way to wriggle out of the situation? I spent the rest of the day cuddling Buddy and trying to put the traumatic event behind me. But try as I might, I couldn't shake the nagging feeling that Karen's wrath was far from over. Sure enough, the following day, my suspicions were confirmed when I received a call from the local animal control office. Apparently, Karen had filed a complaint, alleging that I had been neglecting Buddy and that she was concerned for his well-being. I was stunned, my heart racing as I listened to the officer on the other end of the line explain the situation. "Ma'am, we've received a report that your dog may be in distress. We'd like to send someone out to check on him and ensure he's being properly cared for." I quickly assured the officer that Buddy was in excellent health and that I had been providing him with the utmost care and attention. I even offered to have the officer come by to see for themselves, but they declined, stating that they were obligated to follow up on all complaints, no matter how unfounded they might seem. As I hung up the phone, I couldn't help but feel a growing sense of anger and frustration. How dare Karen continue to harass me and my beloved pet, even after her blatant theft had been exposed? It was clear that she was not going to let this go without a fight. I decided to take matters into my own hands and paid a visit to the local police station, determined to ensure that Karen's false allegations were dealt with swiftly and decisively. When I arrived, I was greeted by the same officers who had responded to the initial incident, and they were as surprised as I was to hear about Karen's latest stunt. "We'll look into this immediately," the officer assured me. "Rest assured, we take animal neglect very seriously, and we'll get to the bottom of this." As I left the station, I couldn't help but feel a glimmer of hope that justice would prevail. But deep down, I knew that Karen was not the type of person to give up so easily. This was only the beginning of a much larger battle, one that would test my resolve and my unwavering dedication to Buddy. In the days that followed, I found myself constantly on edge, waiting for the inevitable knock on the door from animal control. The uncertainty of the situation weighed heavily on my mind, and I couldn't help but wonder what lengths Karen would go to in her quest to get her way. One afternoon, as I was taking Buddy for a walk around the neighborhood, I ran into Mrs. Wilkins, an elderly widow who lived a few houses down. She greeted me with a warm smile, but her expression quickly shifted to one of concern. "Dear, I heard about the trouble you've been having with that dreadful Karen woman," she said, her brow furrowed. "Is everything all right? I saw the animal control van in the area earlier, and I can't help but worry." I explained the situation to Mrs. Wilkins, grateful for her compassionate ear. She listened intently, shaking her head in disbelief as I recounted the details of Karen's false accusations and the security footage that had exposed her deception. "That woman is simply dreadful," Mrs. Wilkins said, her voice laced with indignation. "I've always known she was a busybody, but this is just plain cruel. Why, if I had my way, I'd give her a good talking to." I couldn't help but chuckle at the feisty old woman's willingness to stand up to Karen. In that moment, I felt a renewed sense of strength, knowing that I had the support of at least one concerned neighbor. "I appreciate your concern, Mrs. Wilkins," I said, giving Buddy a gentle pat on the head. To be honest, I'm starting to feel a bit overwhelmed by the whole situation. I just want to be left alone to enjoy my time with Buddy, but it seems like Karen is determined to make my life a living hell. Mrs. Wilkins reached out and squeezed my arm reassuringly. "Don't you worry, dear," she said, her eyes sparkling with determination. "If that dreadful woman sets one foot on your property again, you can bet I'll be right there to give her a piece of my mind." I thanked Mrs. Wilkins for her kindness and continued on my way, feeling a little lighter and more hopeful than I had in days. As Buddy and I strolled through the neighborhood, I couldn't help but wonder if perhaps I had an unexpected ally in the fight against Karen's relentless harassment. Little did I know that the stakes were about to be raised even higher, and that my battle with the persistent Karen was far from over. The days following my encounter with Mrs. Wilkins were a whirlwind of activity as I braced myself for the inevitable showdown with the animal control officers. I knew that Karen would stop at nothing to try to get Buddy taken away from me, and I was determined to do whatever it took to protect my beloved companion. Sure enough, a few days later, a knock at the door announced the arrival of the animal control team. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for the confrontation, and opened the door to find two stern-faced officers standing on my doorstep. "Ma'am, we've received a complaint about the welfare of your dog," one of the officers said, his tone businesslike. "We'd like to come in and take a look around, if that's all right with you." I nodded, stepping aside to allow them entry. "Of course, officers. I have nothing to hide. Buddy is in excellent health, and I can assure you that he is well cared for." As the officers began their inspection, I couldn't help but feel a sense of dread creeping up my spine. What if they found something, no matter how minor, that could be used against me? What if Karen's relentless campaign of harassment ultimately succeeded? While the officers thoroughly examined Buddy and his living conditions, I couldn't help but notice the subtle shifts in their demeanor. Their initial skepticism slowly gave way to a more relaxed and even sympathetic attitude as they interacted with my beloved pet. "Well, ma'am, it's clear to us that your dog is in excellent health and that you're providing him with exceptional care," the lead officer said, his expression softening. "We'll be sure to let the complainant know that their concerns were unfounded." I let out a sigh of relief, my shoulders slumping as the tension drained from my body. "Thank you, officers. I appreciate you taking the time to look into this matter thoroughly." As the officers prepared to leave, I couldn't resist the urge to ask about the status of Karen's complaint. "I'm assuming there will be some consequences for the false accusations, right?" The officer nodded, a grim expression crossing his face. "We take animal welfare issues very seriously, ma'am. Rest assured, we'll be following up with the complainant and exploring any potential legal ramifications for their actions." With that, the officers bid me farewell, leaving me to ponder the implications of their words. I knew that Karen wasn't the type to simply back down, and I couldn't help but wonder what her next move might be. As I settled in for the evening, cuddling with Buddy on the couch, a sense of cautious optimism began to creep into my mind. Perhaps, just maybe, the tide was turning in my favor, and Karen's reign of terror was finally coming to an end. In the days that followed the animal control visit, I found myself constantly on edge, waiting for the other shoe to drop. I knew that Karen was not the type of person to simply give up, and I couldn't shake the nagging feeling that she had something else up her sleeve. My suspicions were confirmed when, a week later, I received a knock on my door and opened it to find a police officer standing on my doorstep. "Ma'am, I'm afraid I have some troubling news," the officer said, his expression grave. "We've received a report from a concerned neighbor about a possible animal abuse case involving your dog." My heart sank, and I felt a wave of panic wash over me. "What? That's impossible. Buddy is in perfect health, and I would never harm him. This has to be some kind of mistake." The officer raised a hand, signaling me to calm down. "We understand your concern, ma'am. However, we're required to investigate all reports of animal abuse, no matter how unfounded they may seem." I nodded, my mind racing as I tried to make sense of the situation. "Who made this report?" I asked, already suspecting the answer. I'm afraid I can't disclose the identity of the complainant, the officer replied. But I can tell you that they claim to have witnessed Buddy being mistreated and that they were concerned for his well-being. I let out a frustrated sigh, knowing full well that this was yet another attempt by Karen to make my life a living hell. Officer, I can assure you that Buddy is loved and cared for. This is nothing more than a malicious attempt by a neighbor to harass me. The officer nodded sympathetically. I understand your frustration, ma'am. We'll do our best to investigate this matter thoroughly and impartially. In the meantime, I'd advise you to cooperate fully with our investigation. As the officer left, I felt a sense of dread wash over me. I knew that Karen wasn't going to give up without a fight, and I couldn't help but wonder what other tricks she had up her sleeve. Later that evening, as I sat on the couch with Buddy curled up beside me, I received an unexpected phone call from Mrs. Wilkins. "Oh dear, I just heard about the latest nonsense from that dreadful Karen woman," she said, her voice laced with concern. "Don't you worry, I'll be sure to give her a piece of my mind tomorrow. This has gone on long enough." I couldn't help but feel a surge of gratitude towards the feisty old woman. In a world that seemed to be constantly stacked against me, it was reassuring to know that I had at least one ally in my corner. As I hung up the phone, I steeled myself for the battles to come. I knew that Karen wasn't going to back down, and that the only way to put an end to her relentless harassment was to fight back with everything I had. The following day, as I anxiously awaited the arrival of the animal control officers, I couldn't help but feel a growing sense of frustration and despair. How could this be happening again? Hadn't the previous visit proven beyond a doubt that Buddy was well cared for and in excellent health? As the officers approached my door, I took a deep breath and prepared myself for the confrontation. This time, however, I was determined to be more assertive and unyielding in my defense of Buddy. "Officers, I want you to know that I am fully cooperating with your investigation, but I also want to make it clear that there is absolutely no truth to these accusations," I said, my voice unwavering. "Buddy is my beloved companion, and I would never do anything to harm him." The officers listened intently, their expressions thoughtful as I recounted the ongoing saga with Karen and her relentless campaign of harassment. To my surprise, they seemed genuinely sympathetic to my plight. "Ma'am, we've reviewed the previous report and the security footage, and we understand that this seems to be a case of a neighbor with a personal vendetta," the lead officer said. "We'll do our best to conduct a thorough and impartial investigation, but I can assure you that we take animal welfare very seriously, and we won't tolerate any kind of abuse or neglect." I let out a sigh of relief, grateful that the officers were willing to approach the situation with an open mind. As they began their inspection, I couldn't help but feel a glimmer of hope that perhaps, just perhaps, justice would prevail. Just as the officers were wrapping up their visit, a familiar figure emerged from the shadows of the neighbor's yard. It was Mrs. Wilkins, marching determinedly towards my home with a look of righteous indignation on her face. "There you are, you dreadful woman," she shouted, pointing a bony finger at the animal control officers. "I've been waiting all morning to have a word with you." The officers exchanged puzzled glances, unsure of how to respond to the elderly woman's outburst. Before they could say anything, however, Mrs. Wilkins continued her tirade. "I know all about your little scheme, trying to take this poor woman's dog away from her. Well, I won't stand for it. Buddy is a beloved member of this community, and you have no right to barge in here and harass an innocent person." The officers held up their hands, attempting to calm the irate Mrs. Wilkins, but she was having none of it. She proceeded to regale them with a passionate defense of my character and Buddy's well-being, leaving the officers visibly stunned and unsure of how to respond. As Mrs. Wilkins finally ran out of steam, the lead officer cleared his throat. "Ma'am, we appreciate your concern, but this is an official investigation, and we'd ask that you refrain from interfering. However, we'll be sure to take your input into consideration as we continue our assessment." With that, the officers bid us farewell, leaving me feeling both relieved and awestruck by Mrs. Wilkins' unwavering support. Perhaps, with her in my corner, I might just have a fighting chance against the relentless Karen. In the days that followed the animal control officer's second visit, I found myself in a tense state of limbo, waiting anxiously for their final ruling. The uncertainty of the situation weighed heavily on my mind, and I couldn't help but wonder what the future held for Buddy and me. As the days turned into weeks, I began to grow increasingly frustrated with the drawn-out investigation. Surely, the evidence was clear-cut enough for the officers to make a swift and decisive judgment. But just as I was about to lose hope, I received a call that would change everything. "Ma'am, this is Officer Gonzalez from the Animal Control Department. I'm calling to inform you that we've completed our investigation, and we've determined that the allegations against you were completely unfounded." I felt a wave of relief wash over me, and I could barely contain my excitement. Does this mean Buddy is safe? That Karen won't be able to take him away from me? "That's correct," the officer replied. "Not only have we cleared you of any wrongdoing, but we've also filed charges against the individual who made the false accusations. She will be facing some serious consequences for her actions." I couldn't believe it. Karen's relentless campaign of harassment had finally been brought to an end. As the news sank in, I felt a surge of gratitude towards the animal control officers, Mrs. Wilkins, and all those who had supported me throughout this ordeal. "Thank you, Officer Gonzalez," I said, my voice trembling with emotion. "I can't tell you how much this means to me. Buddy is my world, and I couldn't bear the thought of losing him." "We understand, ma'am," the officer said, "and we're glad we were able to get to the bottom of this and ensure that justice was served. Please give Buddy a big hug for us." As I hung up the phone, I rushed to the living room, where Buddy was happily curled up on the couch. I scooped him up in my arms, showering him with kisses and tears of joy. "Buddy, you're safe," I exclaimed, my heart overflowing with relief and love. "No one is ever going to take you away from me again." In that moment, I felt a deep sense of gratitude and a newfound determination to protect my beloved companion at all costs. Karen's reign of terror was over, and I had emerged victorious, thanks to the unwavering support of those who believed in me and Buddy's bond. As for Karen, well, let's just say that her actions had finally caught up with her, and she would have to face the consequences of her misguided and malicious behavior. Justice had been served, and the community could finally breathe a collective sigh of relief. With Buddy by my side, I knew that I could face whatever challenges the future might hold. The bond between us was unbreakable, and nothing, not even a relentless Karen, could ever tear us apart.